Hello, friends. My name is Dimitri. You can contact me with questions about immigration to Montenegro, as well as questions about accounting services. Now, let's talk about some news from Montenegro and neighboring countries. Once again, both the minimum and average salaries have increased significantly here. And on the screen, you can see a comparison of average salaries in Montenegro with, yes, with other Eastern European countries, with the average salaries in other Eastern European countries. We can see that salaries in Montenegro are higher than in all Balkan countries that are not part of the EU. In particular, it is higher than in Albania, Serbia, and Bosnia. And salaries in Montenegro are also higher than in some EU countries, such as Bulgaria, Romania, and Lithuania. But we are roughly on the same level as Latvia and Hungary. In addition to salary increases, the government has promised to raise pensions. Let me remind you that pensions were recently increased. The minimum pension currently amounts to 450 euros, and now they are promising to raise them once again. On government billboards, which are displayed all over the country, a pension increase of 50 to 60 euros is being promised. This time it's not about the minimum pension, but the average pension. They raise the minimum pension, and now they will increase it for those who, so to speak, have more years of service, have paid more taxes, in short, for those who are supposed to receive a higher pension. Nevertheless, despite the obvious successes in terms of wage and pension growth, many people have mixed feelings toward the government because it has not yet managed to solve some fundamental problems, specifically to overcome the shadow economy and ensure effective tax collection, without which it is impossible to quickly implement the major infrastructure projects that Montenegro so desperately needs, such as highways and the development of the northern regions. Right now, there is an urgent need to create artificial snow on ski resorts there, and not just that, but also to build hospitals. Any kind of construction requires money. And we're talking about enormous amounts of money. Just one highway costs over $1 billion. But for that, you need money. And to have money, the budget needs to be replenished. And here, at least a third of taxpayers do not participate in filling the budget at all. The government is aware of this problem and promises to solve it, but as they say, we'll see how it turns out. They have now announced the creation of a tax police. So there is a tax inspection office that basically processes reports, but it doesn't actually analyze who is hiding taxes and who isn't. Now they are promising to create a tax police force that will specifically handle this kind of analysis. In other words, it's more or less like what exists in other countries, particularly in the United States. You've seen this in American movies when you're just sitting there not thinking about anything, and then a man in a suit shows up and starts asking questions. So what money did you use to buy this apartment, this car, and things like that? So it's the right measure, a necessary measure. At the moment, we don't have anything like that. They want to create it, but they're doing everything very slowly. And what they want to create will most likely not be created tomorrow, not next year, but sometime in the future. We have criminal cases opened based on foreigners forging educational documents. I should say that this is not the first time such a criminal case has been opened. They have been starting up regularly for the last 2 years. In other words, foreigners quite often submit forged educational documents for nostrification. Frankly, I don't understand the point of this at all, because to obtain a residence permit, it's enough to nostrify a secondary education document. Everyone has a secondary education document, and even if it was lost, it can be reissued. Nevertheless, many foreigners sometimes submit forged documents. A bit of statistics. There are 7,200 foreign children studying in Montenegrin schools. This is about 10% of their total number. The largest number of children in Montenegrin schools come from Russia, Ukraine, Serbia, and Turkey. Specifically, there are 2,512 Russian students there. GDP growth is expected to average 3.7% over the next 3 years. Moreover, the highest growth, though I don't remember the exact figure, but it will be over 5% will occur in the next year, 2025, while the average over 3 years will be 3.7%. It is expected that during this period, budget revenues will increase from the current 3.16 billion euros to 3.49 billion euros. The government promises to complete the highway, which is already partially finished. So far, its benefit is that, for example, when I travel to, it helps to hold back the new ones. Previously, the trip used to take 4 hours. A section from Podgorica to Kolašin appeared, a highway section, it was completed. The journey became an hour shorter. Now I make the trip in 3 hours, I get there in 3 hours. But nevertheless, the highway is still far from being finished. It is planned to run from Bar, a city on the Montenegrin coast, to Bijari, a city in Serbia. You can look up its planned route on the map. This is a very important route, if only because between Podgorica and Serbia there is a road, but it is outdated probably by about 100 years, I would say. It's something very slow there. You literally drive for an hour at 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. Because the road is very narrow and constantly winds around some mountain, twisting as you can see. And this is a very unpleasant stretch. But now they are promising us that instead of this nightmare, we will be able to travel on a proper road. And accordingly, if you are, for example, going to Kopaonik in Serbia to ski in the winter, then this road is of utmost importance for you. You will be able to travel much faster. Currently, the journey from Novi to Kopaonik takes 7 hours. But once the highway is built, it will be both much more pleasant and much faster. The EU is providing 40% of the funding for the construction of this highway. As for the section of the road that is currently under construction, I can't say how much the entire highway will cost, since I couldn't find that information on the internet. But considering that most of it is still not finished, I suppose the cost is probably around a billion or several billion. For the specific section that is currently being built, the EU is providing 200%. They claim that in their view it is 40%, but according to both their opinion and our governments, it is 40% of the projected budget for the construction of this section. As is well known, Montenegro is on its way to joining the EU. And no matter what skeptics may say, sooner or later it will become a member. That is why the EU is funding the construction of major infrastructure projects like this, particularly highways. You know, they finance highways all across Eastern Europe, and Montenegro is no exception. And now some news from our neighbors. The Serbs have decided to reinstate mandatory military service, which is expected to happen in about a year. All foreigners will be required to serve, both those born in Serbia and foreigners who have obtained citizenship up to the age of 30. Currently, just like in Montenegro, they have a professional army. But for some reason, they have decided to abandon it and return to a conscript army, as it used to be. Thank you all for your attention. Goodbye, everyone.